All right, so, I mean, it was like pulling teeth to get Columbia and a lot of other schools, really, to address the most repugnant forms of anti-Semitism on their campuses. That was during the Biden years. Now, though, they appear to be getting a little bit of the message and a clear, loud and clear from Trump, by the way, what's expected. The university statement in writing, they say that they're going to take their legal obligations seriously and are now committed to combating anti-Semitism. It took $400 million for them to write that. You buy that?
Well, look, I hope so. This is something I've been saying from the very beginning. Money forces change. And ultimately, I believe we needed to be willing to revoke all federal funding to these universities that promote or sanction or allow anti-Semitism to rage on their campuses, including student loans. And I think President Trump is taking the necessary steps to force behavioral change at these institutions. And it's not just the money, Rob, it's revoking of student visas for those who are here, as foreign students engaged in this rank anti-Semitism. It is passing the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, getting it signed into law, and forcing the Department of Education to enforce Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So we got to be coming at this at a number of angles, but I think President Trump is doing something that President Biden was unwilling to do, and Democrats like Chuck Schumer and Jerry Nadler refused to do, and that's take on this anti-Semitism that we see on these college campuses. I
wonder if other schools are going to get the message.
I hope so, because if they don't, they're next on the chopping block.
So I want to go to the war in Ukraine for a moment here. President Trump basically kind of politically and publicly threatened to sanction Russia this week if they don't come to the negotiating table for peace, while also, and you know what happened obviously with Zelensky here, to sign on to a mineral deal with Ukraine. What do you think of the strategy of putting the screws kind of to both sides in order to bring about peace?
Well, look, I've been very clear from the beginning. Vladimir Putin is a vile dictator and thug and is responsible for this unprovoked invasion into Ukraine. We have and continue to support Ukraine in their defense of their sovereignty. But I think what the president is trying to say is ultimately, even if we continue to provide weapons and ammunitions, it at best will result in a stalemate, and at worst, Ukraine will still collapse. And that would be catastrophic for Eastern Europe and the free world. And I think what the president is trying to do is bring this conflict to an end, strengthen the U.S.-Ukraine relationship economically, and make sure that there is investment in Ukraine so that we can help rebuild that country, and ultimately get Russia out. And I think part of what the president's approach is to frankly divide Russia from Iran and China. Obviously, throughout the last few years, we've seen the unholy alliance in full display between China, Russia, and Iran. And I think that's the president's objective. And obviously, the only way to get there is to get both sides to the negotiating table.
Let's talk about the Democratic histrionics this week. I mean, you had a front row seat to watch all these little babies during the presidential address. So it's like on cue, right? Donald Trump opens his mouth. Democrats throw a temper tantrum. Watch this.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. The chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
I mean, first of all, what do you think of that stupid stunt? And then they can't even stand for a 13-year-old cancer patient because he was an invitee of the president.
Rob, it reminds me when you were county executive in Westchester and one of the Democratic legislators, who's now the county executive, shut off the lights in the chamber because he didn't like the way it was going. It was embarrassing. It was absolutely embarrassing from start to finish. And it wasn't just Al Green. Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic leadership refused to escort President Trump into the chamber, the first time that's ever happened. They wouldn't stand for the First Lady. They wouldn't stand for the cabinet. They wouldn't stand when the President of the United States walked into the chamber. And worse, as you outlined, wouldn't stand for a 13-year-old boy with cancer who became a Secret Service agent. They wouldn't stand for the mothers of children murdered by illegal immigrants. They wouldn't stand for the wife of a slain New York City police officer. They wouldn't stand for an American held hostage by Russia that was freed. And they wouldn't stand when President Trump announced that the killer, the terrorist killer of the 13 U.S. service members killed at Abbey Gate, was captured and being transferred to U.S. custody. It was the most embarrassing display I've ever seen. They've allowed their blind hatred to cloud all reason.
Congressman, I appreciate you coming on. Enjoy the weekend, and it all starts up again on Monday, D.C.
We're back on Monday.
Take care.